Project 2 Observation Journal, SCS-100 Social Science Perspectives. Greetings, beautiful people. So I've decided to put together this short video to go over the Project 2 Observation Journal. That's the assignment that you're turning in this week in week 4 by 11:59 p.m. on Sunday. If you're running behind, no worries. You have up to 7 days after the due date to still submit the assignment with only a 10% late penalty. Now, the instructions are listed here on the slide, and I'm not going to read it to you, but I'm going to just say that you're essentially putting together everything you've learned from weeks 1, 2, and 3, and you're turning it into a paper, a 3-page paper, and that is what Project 2 Observation Journal is all about. Next couple of slides, I'm going to go over the grading criteria and give you some tips on how to be successful. Supporting work and resources. So before we go over the specific grading criteria, I wanted to highlight some of the resources you have available to you. In Learning Block 2-4, you completed a comparison template, and this is the foundation for your observation journal. In Learning Block 3-2, you participated in a discussion and you talked about which advertisements you selected and why you chose those advertisements and how you identified with or disidentified with the information in those ads. That's going to be useful information as you complete your observation journal. And then you have 3 documents: your checklist, exemplar, and rubric. The checklist is just simply a checklist. You're looking to see, do you have all of this information in your final draft, in your 3-page paper? Some people may write a paper that's only 2 pages. Some people may write a paper that turns out to be 5 pages, but on average it's about 3 pages. The exemplar shows you a perfect example of what a completed observation journal looks like, and I strongly encourage you to take a look at that exemplar. And last but not least, you have the rubric. The rubric tells you the specific grading criteria, and we're going to go over that on the next slide. Critical elements. So I'm just going to go over briefly the 5 sections that you're going to have in your paper. Now, you can find out more about this by looking at the Observational Journal Guidelines and Rubric. Remember, we talked about those supporting documents on the previous slide. So in the first section, you're going to tell me why you chose these advertisements. In the second section, you're going to explain the assumptions and observations that you made about human interactions and behavior while viewing these ads. Third, you're going to identify some relevant topics that we discussed that you can see in the advertisement. And last but not least, you're going to take all of that information and you're going to develop a question that a social scientist might ask that would allow them to further investigate the topics. All right, so now we're down to the nitty-gritty. In all of the different sections, so all 5 criteria, you're going to be rated either exemplary, which is 100%, proficient, which is 85%, needs improvement, which is 55%, or not evident, which is 0%. Okay, so for the first column, why did you choose these advertisements? This was worth 23.75% of this particular assignment. And to get a exemplary, you need to not only tell me why you chose these ads for personal reasons, but you also need to let me know why a social scientist might be interested in analyzing these ads. So you're thinking critically, you're thinking deeply. On the last slide, I'm going to give you a little bit of information about higher order thinking or different levels of processing, and that might help you to move over to the exemplary column rather than the proficient column. For a really good example of what the exemplary looks like, check out the exemplar. All right, moving on to assumptions and observations. I want you to notice that this section has several subheadings. All right, so a tip that I have on the slide here is that it would be very useful if you use the same headings that are listed in the exemplar in your paper. And those headings are article choice, assumptions and observations, social science evidence, and then question. And once you finish the choice section and you move to the assumptions and observations, that section has several subheadings. And the subheadings are audience, message, relationship between people, relationship with product, and effectiveness. So in the assumptions and observations section, in order to get an exemplary, you basically have to show me that you have a mature awareness of human interactions and behavior, as evidenced by your discussion in those subheadings. All right, and again, that's 23.75% of your grade for this particular assignment. The next section, topic. This is the part that I've seen in the past where a lot of students will either excel or fall behind. It's very few students that are just in the middle on this one. So you can get an exemplary if you talk about topics that we have discussed in this class and you connect the dots between those topics and what you observed in your advertisements. Okay, so you want to be very specific. If you notice in the exemplar, they actually have a reference list. Okay, so the more you can use actual social scientific evidence, the higher the chance that you're going to get full credit for this particular portion of the assignment. All right, so moving on to the last section, the question section. This part's a little tricky because you really have to think like a social scientist. So you need to think about everything that you said in the previous sections, and you need to come up with a question that a social scientist might ask. Now, the type of question that you're asking is not a question that a scientist would ask during the course of the experiment or survey. It's more of a question that they would ask, like a research question that would drive the entire study. All right, and I've left some information about research questions in our first discussion on several people's replies, or when I replied to several of your classmates on the very first discussion we had. And if you also take a look at the information that's presented in the module in Module 2, you'll also find information about posing a question using the social scientific inquiry way. All right, the last way that you're assessed, the last 5 points, comes from articulation of response. And this is just looking to see, did you have a lot of grammatical and mechanical errors? If it's a couple, it's not a big deal, but if it's just like plagued with errors and it's hard to read, or it just even takes away or detracts from your final product, so that is worth 5 points. Okay, so this bonus information was just my way of adding a little extra for you guys. If you're already aware of this, awesome. If not, take a look in the description, and I'm going to link a video to talk more about convergent versus divergent thinking, not one I created, but just very briefly, you really need both convergent and divergent thinking to be successful on most assignments, but this assignment in particular. So convergent thinking is where you're focused and you're linear, and you're basically making sure you address the basics or what needs to be addressed. Divergent thinking is being creative, it's coming up with many different ideas and many different solutions. So, you know, you want to kind of go between these two different modes when you're creating this paper. I also wanted to point out Bloom's taxonomy. And Benjamin Bloom was an educational psychologist who developed this hierarchy of understanding. At the base of it is knowledge, then goes to comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. That was the original Bloom's taxonomy. This was done quite a long time ago, so it's been revised, and the new revised version starts off remembering at the bottom, then understanding, then applying, then analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Whether you look at the original or the revised, in both cases it's saying that you can go from a shallow level of processing information to a higher level of processing information. The reason why that's noteworthy for you is because if you stay at the bottom rungs of knowledge and comprehension, or remembering and understanding, you're likely to get needs improvement or proficient. If you want to get exemplary, you're going to want to move up the hierarchy to applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. All right, so you're going to have to dig deep and go a little bit further. For example, when you compare and contrast, that's an example of a higher level of thinking. When you just state something, just something basic, that's going to be a lower level. So as you're developing this paper, you want to ask yourself, am I analyzing these advertisements at different levels, at a higher level, or am I sticking to the basics? Okay, so you made it to the end of the slide. all I want to say is that please don't forget this assignment is worth a pretty good chunk of your grade, so you definitely want to turn it in. And also, this assignment prepares you for our final assignment, the last project. So use the resources that you have available. If you have questions, please post a question to the questions thread. Also, don't be afraid to email me. I respond to emails in 24 to 48 hours. Yeah, I think that's it. Bye, folks.